Everyone, welcome to Defender Fridays. I apologize that I'm not here to give the full introduction. I think Alex already got off talking and getting started, but everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. The weekly checkpoint for all of us here. I'm Matt, part of the Lehman Charlie dedicated team here, and I'm really looking forward to sharing today's Defender Fridays with Alex. Alex, I think you've already got started. I think you already know quite a few folks on this call, at least a few folks who you've already been talking to. I know you know Chris, or at least it sounds like you know Chris. You might know Ken as well. Ken actually made a very special request, Alex. I'll have you know, he was like, "Oh, Alex is going to be on. I want to be on the panel. I want to be there." So we're excited to have everyone here as well. But Alex, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to maybe the rest of the class and telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, cool. I've been doing the cybers for 20, 25 years, depending on how you count it. Cut my teeth in security operations in Canada's federal space. Moved out west to do a security operations center for the Olympics. Sort of like the weather, didn't go back east, and stayed out here. And since I've been out here, I co-founded B-Sides Vancouver and ran that until pesky cough ruined all events, and then I retired out. And in between that, I also co-founded Mirai Security, and I'm the chief innovation officer there. I love it because I get to straddle the technical side, but also the solutioning side for the clients.
Okay, I'm sorry. There's so much in there we need to unpack. Can you first? You might have other stuff you want to talk about, Alex, but can you please tell me what it's like to the whole Olympics thing? What was that like?
For the first time ever, I worked on a project where it did seem like there was no budget. We weren't a cost center, and that's because Bell Canada was the premier telecom sponsor, and there could not be a blip on the international stage. So if there was any risk of failure, there was money for it. And this is when we had the economic downturn. Nortel, also a sponsor, was going belly up. There was a lot of challenges, but almost all challenges can be solved with money.
Yeah. Yeah, that's got to be a really cool experience too, because also is it odd going into such a short-term engagement? I mean, I'm not going to say like short-term security engagements are weird, but is it kind of weird to spin up this entire apparatus with unlimited budget, knowing you have like 2 or 3 weeks before it's all over?
I was on it for 2 years before the games.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. I am sorry. I did not expect that. Okay.
Well, this was, not to pump the tires of, an Olympics, 14 years ago, but it was the first IP-based Olympics. So everything was running over, this modern technology we call the internet, or some variation thereof. It's a 2-year setup. Bell Canada didn't really have a footprint on the West Coast. They're more of a Ontario, Quebec-based telecom. Yeah. So they actually had to build out a massive, a metropolitan area network. So they laid their own fiber around Vancouver, up to Cypress Mountain, up to Whistler. That was a big feat to run that much capacity. And then, like I said, there cannot be any failure. The SLAs are probably infinite nines. If there was any risk, and again, we had Nortel who was going belly up and all the smart people had left, and certainly they're rolling out beta firmwares. So there's a lot of issues, but I had a checkpoint firewall go sideways on me because of, I don't know if everyone remembers the Alteons, the switched firewalls before firewalls could really be that performant. Had one of those go belly up, and we were in a half open state, and they flew people in from like one of the Carolinas like the next day to get it fixed.
Wow, that's got to be awesome, man. What a cool experience and a cool thing to add to the resume as well. Well, I don't want to fast forward 14 years and skip over everything that you did, but I would love if you could, I think today you wanted to talk to us a little bit about the convergence of SecOps and compliance, right? And I have to imagine that that has to be kind of maybe a cornerstone moment in how you go through things. And let me tell you where my head's at on that one while I'm leading there. First off, I didn't realize it was that long of an engagement, but I have this idea that if you talk about these convergences of SecOps and compliance and standardization, and if money is no object, it's like whatever, it's easy to achieve, if you will, right? But I mean, that's no one else lives in that world. right? No one else. I mean, I should say largely no one else lives in that world. I still think there's a few companies out there where money is no object just because they're like whatever, you know. Um, I have to imagine that in the heyday, there's some like I don't know, maybe oil and gas companies who are like, yeah, whatever, just go buy it, that's fine, right? Just do your thing. But in reality, a lot of people have to conduct and practice security and compliance and achieve all the things inside of budget limitations and whatnot, and that's just another hurdle they got to jump over. But man, how does that like tie into like kind of your main topic for today?
Yeah, well, again, I think it's actually part of this journey.
Mm,
I cut my teeth working in, supporting federal environments where like the C and the CIA confidentiality is paramount. Also, integrity
mhm,
and availability. They want them all. And those environments, they would throw. I think like where you see unlimited budgets is going to be, the federal projects, the military projects, et cetera. But I went from working in those environments, very much following standards, whether it would be NIST 853 or our Canadian version of that ITSG 33. We were going with must build to this standard, must really address the threats that would be against the country. Moving out west, I really thought the security clearances and the experience I had would be a huge value. But in fact, like most, companies I was talking to when I was trying to find work was like, ooh, you're really going to make our baby look ugly, aren't you? And it's because cybersecurity, back in the early 2010s, like wasn't a thing. The typical excuses were not a target, we're not big enough, or our acquirer will put the security in. And I went into consulting, and there was some organizations that wanted to understand where they were at and whatnot, and we were starting to do like assessments leveraging CIS benchmarks and whatnot. And one thing I realized in auditing hundreds of environments against CIS or a NIST framework is that like no one's doing it well because IT is complicated. We've been building it on top of itself, making this patchwork quilt of different designs, regimes, everything in between. And now we have to manage that and monitor it. So I came to that like sort of conclusion that like this is a problem. We're not going to be able to really get better at managing IT at the scale that we need to. And at the same time, compliance and privacy legislation and stuff were coming in to sort of encourage good behavior. And PCI is a good example of that, where like companies were having to throw tons of money and put tons of band-aids on old designs, legacy and heritage IT. And they were still not that good, because it was so complicated what they're trying to build on top of. And that's like where like I've come to the conclusion, like, so coming from Ottawa, federal space, like cloud was a bad word up until like 2018, 2019. And I certainly subscribe to that dogma, but I've actually come to the conclusion that cloud actually can enable better security if you let
mm,
it. And that's because you can
mhm.
codify your infrastructure. And then if you can codify it, you can audit it. And now you've got this traceability between what the governance and standards are saying and what the environment is actually doing right now immediately.
Mm.
I'll be the jerk and push back in a couple of ways, just to
Please.
keep things lively. One is
Jeff,
if you
you're here,
already
no
have
way.
shocker. If you already have an on-prem and you choose to add cloud as an additional thing, like you have on-prem Active Directory and you choose to add Entra ID, you're gonna have a really tough time convincing me that two things can be more secure than one thing. Two sets of attack surfaces more secure than one set of attack surface. Generally, high level speaking. The second is, sure, the cloud is a green field. You can implement things the right way, infrastructure as code, but you can do that with your own hardware as well. There's nothing intrinsic about somebody else's hardware, to use the stereotype, that makes it intrinsically more secure, other than it being a greenfield and you kind of have a chance to build it right that the first time or the second time.
Yeah. So, like, and you're not wrong. And I always preface like cloud is more secure if you let it. And if you are bolting on anything, you're sort of repeating history with your patchwork quilt of different IT regimes and designs. And maybe I should change this. And I was listening to one of your previous shows, and you asked somebody, what was like the biggest catalyst for security, and they gave an anti-hero answer of ransomware, which obviously is a good chuckle, right? And like, how would I answer that? And I first jumped to cloud, but Jeff, maybe you're right. It is more the DevOps tools and concepts that actually could enable something that we could never do. And as an example, CIS control 1 and 2 is asset management. The most hardest thing for almost any company to do, because there's not a lot of sexy tools out there that do it. It's not being advertised in airports, so the decision makers aren't really jumping to those controls, even though as an industry we've said it's the most important. And to do it with Nmap and various other glue to get sort of an idea, that could be days, and maybe it's still not accurate.
Yeah, I think it has to be an ongoing process. Like my favorite TLDR, CIS controls 1 and 2 are hardware and software. For the hardware side, I like to ask, what is the delta between your switches CAM tables and your hardware asset inventory? Because it will always be some delta, but getting closer to 0 is kind of the point. And of course, there's more than wired out there, but it's an easy place to start. The things consuming IPs, the things on switch ports inside your environment, how many of those can you tie back to assets that are tracked, monitored, managed, etc.?
Yeah, and there's some good tools to do it, but like I would still argue we get to that 99% level with never getting to 100. Whereas if you have an opportunity to say, let's do away with old and go with new, you can instantly, while I'm explaining this, do an entire asset inventory of your cloud environment. Now, the dark side is they're doing that because they want to bill you for it all. But needless to say, we still have much more awareness of an environment than we would ever have with all the tools and whatnot that we have in traditional bare metal environments.
I thank you, Jeff, for stoking that fire in that one too. Alex, I got to admit, it's I'm actually on your side on all this. Not that I'm against Jeff necessarily. I don't ever want to be in that position, but I actually kind of like the base premise that you came out with. I think it's like this great idea that like I'm going to say companies that are just kind of starting out and have the ability to actually have that clean slate should try to, I think, go this like this best practice road. Like I really think there's value in, even though you're at this startup place, even though security might be the very last thing on your mind, you just want to build, go. I think that like if you can start out a little bit earlier and start to actually lay the template for what is strong, codified, and by the way, we're talking about here as like security as code, correct? In this case, not the, okay, because admittedly, I will say, and I'm not sure if anyone else fell into this trap, when I saw codify, I think about making laws and that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh man, I like this idea. I like that idea too. But no, more about the idea of like security as code, infrastructure as code and everything. I think starting out with good practices from the beginning is like one of the best places that any startup can do, any investment that's worth taking from a like educational or security perspective. And we see it now too with all of the, I'm going to say, all of the kind of like startup focused breaches and incidents that you see these days, it's all little missteps and it's all little misconfigurations. And it's like tiny little security things that honestly, you guys are quoting the CIS controls. They're in the first 5 in a lot of cases, but things like asset inventory, understanding what's running, what you have, what you don't have are some of the most important and basic checklists that I'm human, so I know the answer, but I feel like theoretically, if you start with 2 assets and you grow to 10 and then 20 and then 30 and then 100, like just start small, just start small and just start keeping track of things. And next thing you know, you've got this robust inventory, but no, unfortunately it doesn't work that way. So
I think in startup world, I talk about every time your company grows, maybe an order of magnitude or so, that your approach just fundamentally has to change. And I think there's some truth there for organizations. A friggin' Excel spreadsheet can work for a company of 100 or fewer. That's not going to scale up to your thousands and tens of thousands, let alone millions of assets.
Yeah, and yet, but it's better than nothing. That's the thing. That's a tough part. I don't know, Alex. Do you see this out there in the world too? Do you see like companies just have nothing I mean, and let me tell you where I'm coming from with this. Sometimes when I'm in this conversation with people, they're like, where do I start? I'm like, open notepad.exe and start. And I view that as a little bit of a joke. Like, obviously, you don't want to keep track of stuff in Notepad, but I'm like, just start somewhere, right? It's like, I read this thing the other day where it was like, getting started is not a time, it's a feeling. Like there is no like, oh, when's the right time to get started? It's like yesterday was the right time to get started. So just start keeping track of what you've got and then start to build a process around it as you find deficiencies. But if you don't try, you'll never find the deficiencies you need to grow. You know, but yeah, I agree with what Jeff is saying here as well. Is like, especially if you have a hyper virtualized environment. And Alex, this is my question to you: are you saying from a cloud environment it's easier to take inventory?
Yeah, because they want to bill you for it.
So
that is absolutely true.
Yeah, I like this. So, so if you're in the IT on-prem space, align your devices with what your network devices are saying. There's your inventory for that, and in the cloud, just review your bill.
Yeah, and again, like I think we are seeing a swing back where like large SaaSes are actually repatriating their apps into their own infrastructure, and I think that's because the maturity of the DevOps tooling and concepts have made it so that certainly we can do infrastructure as code now on-prem as easy as on with a CSP. Again, that was the big aha moment for me, was like, wait, we can actually have 100 servers that are actually consistent. That like even in 2010, even 2015, certainly there were some tools out there, but maybe they were like for only the mega enterprises. But infrastructure of code solutions have democratized that we can have that repeatability and consistency that when I was doing audits, like, well, first of all, I couldn't audit everything. No one had the budget for that, so it was doing spot audits. But if you looked at 5 systems configurations, you had 5 separate different configurations, even with a power GPO administrator. It's just IT is complex and hard.
Yeah. No, too true, sir. Too true. Alex, only because I'm selfish. I don't want to like change topics for everyone else's benefit, just for my own. I want to know a little bit about running B-Sides Vancouver. Like, I want to know a little bit about what it takes to pull those types of events together. And the other reason I'm bringing this up is we've got Ken on the call with us, who's also a fellow Lima Charlie-er. And Ken is also pretty involved with, I think, some local B-Sides events too. And I want to like, for everyone here who may not be up to par on kind of like the B-Sides events and what they do and what they mean and that kind of stuff, could you guys take a minute or two and talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I moved out west with like, my family and my social circle back in Ottawa. And, the girlfriend at the time was getting pretty over the pillow talk on the cybers, right? So like, I was looking for peers. And while there was certainly a few colleagues I had, I really didn't know many people. And that was right around the time that the first B-Sides were kicking off in Vegas and I think San Francisco. So, I had reached out to the organizing committee and said, like, who, can I start this? And they said, hey, there's some other guys that are also trying to get it off the ground. So, I jumped on with those guys. We, had 100 people, 10 pizzas and some really good conversations. And it really lit that flame. And every year we essentially were doubling our size, doubling our capacity. There's various shades of B-Sides out there. Some are literally 50 nerds in a pub. Others are more well organized and whatnot. I was lucky that my wife already was running a cybersecurity conference, so I was really able to grab some of that pillow talk and roll it into creating more and more awesome events. But yeah, like it was a labor of love. The pandemic and then my child arriving forced me into retire, but I had done it for 8 or 9 years, and I had gotten what I wanted out of it. My company Mirai was founded out of that work and that community. And that's how Ken and I know each other, is like, when I was looking for great speakers that are going to rock the boat, Ken Weston.
Yeah. I think my first one was 2015. So I was up there. It was awesome. Just it's a short flight here from Portland, but it's probably one of my favorite B-Sides. It was always the most fun. Not just the quality of the talks and everything, but also the community up there. It's very different than other communities that I've been part of. They're very welcoming, but also sharing a lot of information. You know, one thing I thought was really interesting is a lot of folks use the same tools. You know, I found it true in Vancouver. I found the same thing in Calgary. It was like their peers, like, hey, what are you guys using for like, you know, fishing training? And then I would find out that they're all using the exact same tools, which made it a lot easier when I was building workshops and things. And I would look at the tools that they're using, and that's what I would sort of build like when I was at Splunk. So I kind of had this package of, you know, I know these are the 5 tools I'm going to run into any customer I run into in Vancouver, because they're all sort of peers and they're sharing that information. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But.
Yeah, the Vancouver cyber scene is a thing. Like it wasn't, you know, I would say there was an ISC squared chapter that had a gathering of 20, 30 people monthly, but you know, is that really what we were looking for? No, right? So like B-Sides spun off a monthly pub night. It spun off another event I run, you know, that are round tables that happen quarterly. And it spun off a lot of other like subgroups. You know, the DC 604 group, you know, is alive and well, and I think they actually took over the pub nights. So yeah, it's great. Like, you know, like I had to retire out of it. I've been doing it for so long, and I had, you know, a few other priorities. But it was really awesome, and you know, Ken and other like international speakers I was able to get up here, and they were all like very impressed by the, you know, bang for buck that we were able to pull off. And I guess my secret is, you know, don't pay anyone, you know, which is the B-Sides way, right? And if you don't pay anyone, you can really, you know, allocate all the sponsorship funds to making events awesome.
That's not completely true, because you guys did pay us in beer, like in a lot of beer, like some nights. It was the parties and things. It was a lot of fun. Great people.
I would say if you don't pay anybody, it also makes their complaints like less heavy. So you're just like, yeah, whatever. You don't have to be here, you know. So your issues are squashed. For anyone who's curious, I think Alex also mentioned DC 604. 604 is the area code. What looks to me like British Columbia, the Lower Mainland region covering Vancouver and them. So I'm assuming, Alex, that's where it's from. But I wanted to make sure before I advertise that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. That's the DEF CON
Awesome.
group, and 604 is that, you know, if you're an OG West Coaster, which I guess I am now since I've lived out here so long, you would have a 604 area code, but that is no longer an area code that you can have.
What is it now?
Well, it is still 1, but it's not available. You likely can't get a number. So there's 778 is the
nice.
The new, because again, West Coast is a very transient space. A lot of people run away from winter, come here, try to make it, find out cheese is expensive, move back home. So and you know, there's a lot of you know, Australians and Europeans that come to work on the ski hills and things like that. So it is a bit of a transient community. So you know, if somebody's been out here for a while, if they have a 604 phone number.
Yeah, it's also a place where you go if you want to buy an apartment building and never live in it. You just want to hang on to it for a little while. That's another spot to do that into. Awesome. Well, for anyone who's listening, one of the reasons that we'll shift in the magnifying glass really quick to what Ken and Alex were talking about there is, like, you know, in the spirit of community and growth and that kind of stuff, if anyone's not aware and not familiar with, you know, hey, do I have a local meetup group? Where can I go to talk to people of a like mind? I think Alex described a really, really good, unique, but commonly shared problem. So it's not a niche issue, but it is unique to cyber, where you're like, no one at home wants to hear me like dribble on about this stuff. Who do I go talk to? Check out your local B-Sides, check out your local DEF CON groups, check out your local meetups. You'd be surprised just where you find, first off, where you find groups, number one, and number two, like how strong they are as well. In the middle of the United States, like B-Sides Iowa is actually like, and I'm not trying to pass anything to anybody about anything, but I will say Iowa is commonly referred to by a lot of folks like a flyover state. It's just like in, you know, it's in the middle of the US, and usually people on either coast don't take a point to visit there, if you will, right? But there's a thriving, awesome information security group up there. There's a lot of cool stuff happening in places you might not expect and stuff like that. So for anyone who's like, I need someone else to talk to, let them know. And then Alex, I think you also mentioned your business came out of that, right?
Yeah. You know, I became an independent consultant. You know, if you've got a good skill set, you know, maybe just do it yourself. So, you know, I am a recovering ArcSight guru, for anyone that wants to have a quick chuckle there. So, you know, I was consulting with ArcSight, and you know, what I was struggling with was the clients that would be like, hey, can you also do this? And like, I either could, but didn't have the bandwidth because of other work. and I found it was really hard to, find somebody that was willing to, work on a project with me. Everyone every independent consultant with a business card from Vistaprint, wanted their own brand on there. So I found it was like a little bit hard to work that way. So, Mirai was founded as trying to create a sort of a back office for ICs to come in from the cold and work together. And, that was sort of the vision. And, we're 8 or 9 years in now, and really built out of that community.
It's awesome, man. And I think that's the other big takeaway for folks too, is you never know what type of connections you'll make out of these too, as well. And now, luckily, this chat room, we might want to save this chat because it looks like people are just dumping their local B-sides meetups inside of there. Jeff has covered a significant portion of the East Coast here by scaling from Baltimore all the way down to what looks like South Carolina. So Rochester all the way down to South Carolina. But there's a lot of really cool things going on out there. So for folks that just like looking for a common community, check these events out. And like Alex mentioned as well, you never know what you're gonna get out of it. You never know like how it may start out as just a few people hanging out in a pub, drinking beers, talking cyber stuff. And next thing you know, wow, I've got business partners. I've got friends in the industry. I've got job connections. And I will say, Alex, do you go to Hacker Summer Camp every year?
I used to. I've taken a pause when they changed venues. Being somebody that's run events in the past, I know that substantial changes in systems and methodologies can cause bumpiness. So
yes,
I did skip it this year.
Okay.
And also I was in Vegas for 10 days because of birthday, the conferences, and then a wedding anniversary. So I needed a break.
Oh, that's 11 days too much of Vegas right there.
Yeah.
But no, for anyone who's also like, and this is kind of like the fringe, I think the fringe but cream of the crop benefit of all these events is when you go to something like a DEF CON or a Black Hat every year and there's like 25, 40,000 people staring you in the face. And you're like, well, there's my 10, there's my people who I know. So it's a great spot to be in. So that's awesome. Alex, we got like a minute and a half left or so. Any final words, talking points from anyone here, or anything embarrassing stories you have about Ken that you want to share with the community? We're up for those too. Not that you may have those off the cuff. Or you don't know which one to tell. There's so many.
Yeah.
Oh, there's lots of great stories. I think
it works two ways, buddy.
Yeah, I know. Nothing TLPL release on a public forum like this.
There we go.
Yeah, just like I think like in closing, the world is getting more regulated and needing to be more compliant, and SecOps has a very important role in supporting getting an environment as close to realistic as possible. And the modern things I've mentioned make it actually possible to get into the high 99% accurate with those controls. And it is very much about being able to validate your controls exist for regulatory purposes, for insurance purposes, and then on top of that is getting those people and processes dialed in so that all that money you've spent on toys actually does bring a net benefit of de-risking running an IT environment in a hostile space, also known as the internet.
Love it. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. We're right at the end too. And Alex, these 30-minute sessions always go by too fast because even in your brief introduction, I got to hit on 2 points I wanted to bring up. 2, not the other 4 that came out of this too. But thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, everyone, thanks for being here on Defender Fridays. It is always a fun time when we all get together every 30 minutes on Friday and get to meet cool people like Alex, tell good stories, and listen to what Jeff has to share with us this week. But with that said, everyone, I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next week. Same place, same time. Thanks again, Alex, for joining us.
Take care.
Goodbye, friends.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
Bye. See ya.